All right, 504, Chapter 2, Understanding Economics and How It Affects Business. Let's look at the learning objectives for this chapter. We're going to explain the basics of economics, explain what capitalism and how free markets work. We're going to compare socialism and communism, analyze the trend toward mixed economies, describe the economic system of the United States and its significant key economic indicators, especially GDP, the gross domestic product, contrast fiscal policy and monetary policy. Again, something we'll talk about later when we get into chapter 19. All right, here, let's move on a little bit. Economics is simply how a society employs its resources to produce goods and services. And then also there is consumption that goes along within that. There are two schools of economics: macroeconomics, which concentrates on the society as a whole or a nation's economy as a whole, and then microeconomics, which is concentrates on individuals and individuals' behavior and how individuals make choices. One of the things I want you to remember about microeconomics, by the way, I hope that you would take at least macroeconomics before you leave Union. One of the things you have to remember about microeconomics, and speaking of individuals, you talk about this is using scarce resources. And if you buy product A or object A, you can't buy object B. You can save what your disposable income, or you can spend it. You can't do both. Now, somebody will say to me, "Oh, well, hey, wait a minute here. I save some of it and I spend some of it." Well, yes and no. You haven't saved all of it, or you haven't spent all of it. So you've done part of one and part of the other. So it's one of those things that you have to think about. And microeconomics is simply about making choices. And of course, macro is as well, how we decide to do things as a nation. This is resource development, how we're able to increase resources. Now, that's somewhat of an oxymoron because we're talking about many of the resources we use are finite, meaning that we may have an abundance now, but it's not going to be an abundance forever. And create conditions that we will be able to make better use of what we have. This is an example of using resources. Here's the example of hydrogen fuel and using ways that growing foods through a technique known as hydroponics. Now, hydrogen is something that we can create. And so if we're able to harness hydrogen and use it wisely, and I use that term because we don't always do things wisely, we'll be able to wean ourselves from fossil fuels, oil and coal and things of that nature. Now, what we find here is that for many years, economics was known as the dismal science. That came from a gentleman by the name of Thomas Malthus. He believed that the rich had most of the resources, the poor had the greatest population, and because of that, resources would run out. And by the way, I said most of the resources, I should have said most of the wealth. So that's why it was christened the dismal science, because as you see, there's no good end to that game. And notice that the neo-Malthusians, people who still believe in Malthus's statement, but are no longer, back in the time of Malthus, believe there are too many people in the world, and we have to have such things as birth control. And notice they use the term radical. Now, if you notice here on the flip side, there are many economists believe that a large population can be a resource. And I'm going to throw this in. You can see what they say here, but I'm going to throw this into you and make sure that I kind of drive this point home with what is on the slide. And that is a large population can be a good resource, but only if it has the proper amount of education. If we have too many people who don't have the education and they have to rely on some type of subsistence or help from others, then that's a drain on the economy. So you have to think about this. Not when I say that, I'm not talking about people who get some kind of benefits, we take the benefits away and things like that. I'm not talking about that. And I'm talking about people who will become a drain on the economy simply because they're not being productive. They're not helping. They're not trying to move forward. So please don't take that as I'm saying that we have a lot of deadbeats. I'm not saying that at all. What the people that we have that we find at the lower end, we have to do things for them to raise them up and to wean them from what's happened. It's very difficult. No one ever chooses to live in poverty. I've heard that statement bandied around that poverty is a choice. Poverty is not a choice. So what we need to do as a society is to see where we can help people and to move them up in the economic chain. Adam Smith, who wrote the book that everybody refers to as The Wealth of All Nations. That's not the exact title of the book, but that's what people like to refer to it. Believed that freedom was essential for an economy to grow. That's freedom to own property, to do with your property as you want, to keep the profits in the business, etc. And notice what Adam Smith said here, and this is very important. People will work hard if they believe they're going to be adequately rewarded. That's nothing new, but it's something we need to many times repeat, because too often, and we'll talk about this when we get to theory X and theory Y, people think that the ordinary person doesn't want to work, and that's just a bunch of hogwash. Excuse the expression. Smith went on to say that as people improve their own situation, they'll help others improve their situation as well. And then he introduced what he called the invisible hand. When self-directed gain leads to social and economic benefits for the whole community. Now, there's one thing that Smith mentions and doesn't really mention a lot, and I want to point this out to you, not to take anything away from Smith, but to tell you that one thing that Smith did not mention, at least as far as I can remember, or didn't say it in the way I'm going to say it, if one person is made better off, that means someone else is going to be less better off. Now, let me just give you this as an example. If you and your coworker are both competing for a promotion, and you are successful, you win the promotion, and the promotion says that you're going to get an extra $100 a week. That's a substantial amount of money, $5,200 more a year. So as compared to your other coworker, you are better off, and as he or she is compared to you, he or she is less well off. Now, their standard of living has not changed, no, but compared to yours, it has changed. So you need to keep that in mind, and that's not a criticism here. It's something we have to understand, that in our society, capitalist society, free market society, one person's made better off, someone else is going to be less better off compared to that person. And we have to understand that, and we have to accept it. We don't have to like it. We have to accept that that's a fact. We can do things to make ourselves better off. But this just gives you talking about how the invisible hand works. The farmer sows crops. He or she makes money by selling the crops. He or she wants to earn more. The only way he or she can earn more money is to sow more crop. And the only way that they can get more crop to market is to hire more workers. And so when he or she hires more workers, more people get more money, et cetera, et cetera. And then the community winds up being better off because the farmer is able to produce more and get more to market. And notice here what happens in many economies. You'll get this somewhat in the second video, maybe not completely as this is, but you'll see this and you'll understand it. And I hope it will resonate with you as it resonates with me. And I watch that video every time I teach this class. I watch all the videos. In many countries, to operate, you have to go get government permission to do that. Now, yes, you have to do that in some cases in the United States. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine used to own a state farm insurance agency. And I say used to because he's retired now. And he was talking, and he moved to a new location. So he had to get a business permit and things of that nature. That is different than saying permission to own, to build, etc. However, he found out that if he wanted to do some remodeling to his building because it wasn't up to a certain code for handicap accessibility, he was going to have to make major changes. And so the city said to him, "You're best if you leave it the way it is, and don't make any more changes than what are necessary because you're going to go into a lot of problems." So, yeah, he had to have some permission, but he didn't have to have permission to start the business, etc. And as long as the area was zoned for business, he was okay. Now we're going to talk about the economy we have in the United States, known as capitalism. It is what we work on, what we have, and this is where all the factors of production, if you will, are owned by individuals, not by the government. Now there are some exceptions, but by the rule, no. These are the countries that are founded on capitalistic ideals. State capitalism, a little bit different. This is where a state, now this is kind of what you have in China today. The state, rather than private ownership, operates in businesses. And notice it only says China, but it says Russia as well. Yeah, probably maybe even more true in Russia than it is in China, although China still has a lot of state-operated businesses. They've had some success, but unless they completely embrace capitalism, then it's probably never going to be a true capitalism or true free market. These are the basic rights of capitalism. Private property ownership. You can start your own business. You get to keep all the profit. Notice the next one sounds like an oxymoron, a right to competition. Absolutely. And then you can choose what you want to do. Franklin Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, added 4 additional freedoms. Freedom of expression and speech. Of course, some of that's codified in the First Amendment of the Constitution. Freedom to worship the way you wish, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Freedom from fear was a big thing with Roosevelt because when he became the president, we were in the beginnings of the Great Depression, and people were afraid of what was going to happen to them, and for very good reason. Free market decisions. It is the market that decides, that's us, what a company will make, how much it will make, and what it will sell it for. Because if we don't want to buy it at that price, we're not going to buy it, or we're going to go to a knockoff, if you will, and buy something that's less expensive. Uh, and this whole slide here tells you, in essence, maybe a little bit better than the way I told it. This is the circular flow of payment, and you can see this in your text. It can be a little complicated. I don't think completely, but it is somewhat. Uh, by the way, I was thinking you could see it in the text, and maybe it's not as it used to be in one of the former editions, but maybe not in this one. This is just the circular flow of payments. Don't get too concerned about it. And it's not something we need to pay a lot of attention to. Now this gets back, it sort of makes the, not sort of, it really drives home the point that we were making about the market telling the companies this is what it is. So right here, you know, I may want to sell my product for 50 bucks, but not too many people are going to buy it. So I decide I'm going to lower my price to 30, and I find that everybody wants to buy it at 30. So that's what I established the price at. That's what customers are willing to pay. They're not willing to pay the $50 that I want. I would like to sell it for 50 bucks, but they're not going to pay it. Now, what good does it do me to say I'm only going to sell this for $50 if I can't sell anything? So what we have then is what's known as the supply curve, and we'll also see the demand curve. And you can see these part of the supply curve at figure 2.1, the demand curve, figure 2.2, and then the equilibrium point, figure 2.3. All these are found on page 38. So we don't have to worry too much about these curves. What I want to tell you is this: if the curve is going in direction to the right, it's good. If it's moving to the left, it's not good. What this is just showing is the supply the company is going to make available. That's the supply curve, that they're willing to sell those at different prices. The demand curve is what we, the consumer, are willing to pay at different prices, how much we're going to buy it at different prices. And then the equilibrium point is where supply and demand meet. And this is something that's negotiated. All right. Now this particular slide talks about Florida crop had bugs. Prices rose by what it says here, 16%. So if there's no control here whatsoever of supply and demand, then we're going to have obviously a lot of problems. We find that there are 4 types of competition. Perfect competition, which doesn't really exist. It did exist one time in diamonds because the only diamonds were found in a certain area of South Africa. That's no longer true today, so there's more competition with diamonds. Monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. Each of these is explained in greater detail in the text. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, just to let you know that they're there. Here are the free market benefits and limitations or negatives. Open competition, opportunities for people to work their way up on the economic ladder. Limitations are, and I don't like to use this as limitations as much as I like to talk about, about them being negatives. And the negative to me is this one right here. People may start to let greed drive them. That is not a limitation, because sometimes when the greed goes crazy, things go crazy too. Of course, that's going to implode the other way eventually. But we have to worry about greed. And when greed gets out over the sector, and we're going to have a lot of problems. Excuse me. Well, I just lost the slides here from chapter 2. Let's see if we can get these back up. Here we go. Well, we got it, but not where I want it. There we are. There we are. Yeah, that's chapter 1. I don't want chapter 1. Yeah, I'm still having some technical difficulty here, so let's just hold on a second, see if we can't get this back. Well, we'll do this a different way here. I beg your pardon, just hold on a second. We'll get this right back up here. I hit the wrong button. Out it went. Well, that's not what I want either. All right, now there we go. I apologize for the technical issue. Now let's look at socialism. It's an economic system, notice, that's based on a premise that some basic businesses should be owned by the government. And the reason they do this is to evenly distribute profits among society. We do have entrepreneurs running small businesses. Citizens are highly taxed. They have what's known as a cradle-to-grave operation. And the government is more involved in protecting things like the environment than they are in other things. Here's some benefits of socialism. Social equality, free education. Now that education is not free because you're being taxed to pay for it. Health care, child care, longer vacations, which is true the norm in many European countries, for instance, is 3 weeks vacation. Shorter work weeks. There's some negatives. Fewer incentives for business people to take risks. There's a brain drain. Supposedly, I don't know how true this is, but it does seem to be at least partially true. And that is that some of the country's best workers will leave because they don't feel that they have freedom to do things. And fewer innovations and inventions. Communism is a stricter version, if you will, or a more extreme version of socialism, at least as far as I'm concerned. Here, the government owns and makes almost all decisions. Prices don't reflect the demand, and neither does supply. Most communist countries suffer from severe economic issues. We're moving into today what's known are mixed economies. There are 2 major systems: free market, which is what we have; command economies. Those are things like China and Russia and communist countries. We're moving toward a mixed economy. It's neither completely free nor completely command controlled. but uses the pluses and minuses, if you will, of both systems. We find that there's a lot of economic expansion in Africa, and it's something that will continue because, as of right now, for the most part, many Africa as a continent is the least developed. There are countries in other areas of the world that are less developed than some African countries. There's no question about that. But as a whole, it's probably least developed. And of course, it has a tremendous amount of natural resources. These are some of our key economic indicators. Gross domestic product. That's the total value of the final goods and services produced in a country. And here we're talking about the United States in a given year. As long as the company is within the country's border, all those numbers are added up and they go into what's known as the gross domestic product. I don't think you're going to be able to see this too well, but this is the gross domestic product of the United States. We have some other things we have to worry about: inflation, disinflation, and deflation. Inflation is just a general rise of prices over a given period. Disinflation is when prices increase, but inflation itself is declining. And then deflation, prices are declining because there's too few dollars chasing too many goods. Another key indicator is the Consumer Price Index. This measures the pace of inflation or deflation. Government computes this using a variety of prices and factors: housing, food, apparel, etc. The Producer Price Index is something a little bit different, measures the prices at the wholesale level, whereas Consumer Price Index is at the retail level. Higher the productivity, the lower cost of producing goods and services. Keeps prices down. Technology helps with this. We have 4 business cycles, and you can see these in your text. Economic boom, a recession, then we have a depression and a recovery. The recession is, notice, is 2 or more consecutive quarters, 3-month periods of decline in the GDP. Depression is a severe recession, and the recovery is when things are starting to move back to normal. One little aside here, when we had the Great Depression, it started in 1929. After a period of time, the government economists and other folks decided to use the word depression or the term depression because they felt the term recession was too severe. And there are some who would tell you that the Great Recession that we went through recently started in late 2007, really started to morph in 2008, and we're slowly but surely getting away from, with more severe in some cases than the Great Depression. I guess the only difference we could talk about was in the Great Depression, we had at least 25% of the people of the workforce out of work, unemployed. We did not reach that during the Great Recession. Federal government's fiscal policy object is to keep the economy stable. Notice it talks about by increasing or decreasing taxes and or government spending. Fiscal policy is determined by taxation and government spending. We'll spend a little bit more time on that when we get to Chapter 19 and Chapter 20. National deficit, that's what we owe because we spent more than we've taken in. the national debt as a sum of what we owe over a period of time, and surplus is what we would have if we had one. Don't really have that today. And that is going to bring us to the end of chapter 2. It is 5:34. Let's take a short break till 5:36, and we'll come back and discuss chapter 3, which talks about global trade. Thank you. Please come back in 2 minutes, 5:36. All right. Talking this chapter about global trade, our learning objectives discuss the importance of global market and the roles of comparative advantage and absolute advantage in global trade. Explain the importance of importing and exporting. Illustrates the strategies used in reaching global markets and explain the role of multinational corporations. Evaluate the forces that affect the trading in global markets. Debate the advantages and disadvantages of trade protectionism. And then finally discuss the changing landscape of the global market and issues of offshore outsourcing, which we've talked a little bit about that, and we'll discuss a little bit more shortly. Over 90% of the companies doing business globally believe it's important to have employees who have international experience. And so that would certainly go for each of you listening as well. Notice this particular slide. North America makes up approximately 7.4% of the world's population. The United States, in and of itself, would make up less than 7.4%. Notice Asia, the continent, 60.2% of the population. Importing and exporting, in pretty simple terms, importing is bringing things into the country for sale from somewhere else. Exporting is taking our product and shipping it overseas for sale. Notice we are the largest importing and the second largest exporting country nation in the world. So those people who say we don't make things in America obviously don't look at that slide. We find a lot of countries have abundant natural resources. Notice that Russia is mentioned here, as well as Venezuela. But they need technical resources and technical know-how from other countries to help them extract their natural resources. Venezuela, as many of you may know, is a basket case. There's economic problems down there. But right now, the inflation rate in Venezuela is so bad, it is very difficult for people to buy basic necessities, if they can find them. Global trade allows countries to produce those products that it does most efficiently and effectively, and to buy those that it doesn't. And free trade is the movement of goods across boundaries country boundaries without regard to political and or economic barriers. These are the pros and cons of global trade, and I only want to talk about a couple of these. One of the pros is productivity grows when countries produce those things in which they have a comparative advantage. Comparative advantage simply means that a country is going to produce those products which it can do most efficiently and effectively. And it will buy those products that it cannot from someplace else. On the con side, workers may be forced to accept pay cuts, who threaten to move their jobs overseas to low-cost areas. Now you can see these pros and cons graphically displayed at the top of page 64. Pardon me. And I suggest that you take a few minutes to look at them because something that's very important, and you will gain some insight into those as well simply by looking at them. This is comparative advantage and absolute advantage. The theory, and I've mentioned it before, of comparative advantage. It's going to produce those products that it produces most efficiently, and the ones that it does not, it's going to buy elsewhere. Absolute advantage, as I said, probably doesn't exist any longer, is where a country has a monopoly on producing a specific product and nobody else can do it either efficiently or it doesn't even exist in that country. As I mentioned, diamonds at one particular time, but it's no longer true today. Small business is the key to global growth. Look, 1%, only 1% of small businesses export, yet they account for 30% of total exports. What would happen if we got more people into that business? I would think the sky's the limit. Now, this is a slide we're not going to spend any time on. Notice that exporting creates a boost to the economy, and it's something that we certainly like to do. We kind of talked a little bit about this in the past. We're going to use some a little bit different terms. The balance of trade, just the value of what we trade overseas or what's traded here, exports versus imports. Surplus is something that's we're ahead of the game here. It's favorable to our side. Trade deficit is just the reverse. Balance of payments is the difference between what we have coming in and what we have going out. Obviously, the goal is to have more coming in than going out and to have a favorable balance. This is an issue that the United States has been concerned with, and that is dumping. Notice what this says here. It's very, very interesting because we have to get our minds around this. It's selling products in a foreign country. Now we've accused Russia, South Korea, and several other countries, China, I believe, of selling steel and concrete. Not necessarily all three of them, of both of those products, but either one or the other or both, at prices lower than those charged for production in the country. In other words, what it costs to produce, let's say a ton of steel in China, for instance. Let's say it's $1,000. It's going to cost them $1,000 to produce that. They're going to bring that same steel that costs $1,000 to produce and sell it for $800 here in the United States. That's known as dumping, and that's strictly prohibited. I forgot about Brazil. All right, let's move on here. Now, these are the ways that U.S. companies get into global markets. And this is, you can see this graphically displayed in your text on page 67, figure 2.4. And when it goes from the left side to the right side, least amount of commitment to the most amount of commitment, licensing, exporting, franchising, contract manufacturing, international joint ventures and strategic alliances, and finally, foreign direct investment. licensing is simply this. A company in the United States is going to give a company in another country the license to manufacture a product or use its trade and then to pay a fee for that. So what do we gain from this? You get revenues you wouldn't have had otherwise, and you spend little or no money to produce the product. A downside to that, of course, would be that the foreign company would gain expertise and no longer want to do business with the other company. All right. And then exporting, simply we know what that is. We have exporting assistance centers that help people in the United States, that's run by the Department of Commerce, do business overseas. They provide expertise in exporting, sometimes with finance, etc. And they sort of smooth out the barriers, if you will, or smooth out the road, make it easier to do business. Then you have the ETCs, which help companies engage in indirect exporting by finding buyers and sellers, and then dealing with the customs office and documentation and things of that nature. Franchising is just what it says. It's the same as it would be here in the United States. It's a contractual agreement to sell a product in a foreign country like McDonald's in Germany or Starbucks in England or something of that nature. They can use the name and sell the products in a specific area. No different than franchising in the United States. And we'll talk more about franchising in Chapter 5. Have to be careful to adapt to the country in which you're going to do business to make the product that they want. And then this just talks about the different types of companies that have done business. These are all Yum brands: KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut. These are different kinds of donuts that are sold in different areas, and what those people in the foreign country happen to like. So I'm looking for. This is just talking about McDonald's. 34,000 restaurants in over 118 countries. Obviously, it has different menus. You can go to Germany and get a beer in a McDonald's, which you can't do in the United States. Well, at least right now you can't. That may change, obviously, but right now you can't. Now, this is just different things that McDonald's does for the country in which it's doing business. Contract manufacturing. Here, a foreign company produces private label goods for the domestic company, and then the domestic company attaches this label to them. It is a form of outsourcing. It allows a company, in some cases, to experiment with a new product and in a new market without incurring heavy startup costs, and temporarily meet unexpected increase in orders. A joint venture is exactly what it says. It's a partnership between a company in the U.S. and a company in a foreign country. And usually they're going to undertake some type of major project. Here's some of the benefits. There's a shared risk here. There's shared marketing and management expertise. And you get to enter a market which you may not have been able to enter before without having a foreign partner. Strategic alliance. This is a long-term partnership. Two companies build a competitive market, look for competitive market advantage, etc. Notice here that they're not typically sharing costs, risks, management, or profits. these provide broad access to markets and capital and technical expertise. There was a strategic alliance between General Motors and Toyota in California some years ago. Unfortunately, it did not pan out, and I don't know the reasons why, but it seemed to be beneficial to both companies, but then, just as I mentioned, fell apart. Foreign direct investment, that's a pretty easy term to think about. By permanent property and businesses in a foreign country. Primary advantage here is the parent company maintains complete control. Disadvantage is you're going to have to commit funds and technology within foreign boundaries, and there may be some restrictions there. So here you have some pluses and minuses as to whether you want to do this, but this is all ways of doing marketing. Now, I like to show this slide because we talk about what's made in America. A Toyota Camry is made in Kentucky and Indiana, Georgetown, Kentucky, specifically. I don't know the town in Indiana. 75% of the parts in that car are American. The Ford Fusion, on the other hand, by the way, just a piece of information here for you. My wife and I own a Ford Fusion hybrid, manufactured in Michigan, yet only 30% of the parts are American. So you have to be careful when you say, oh, this is American, or no, that's American, or something else is American. I used to, when I taught this class in a face-to-face setting, I used to ask if Toyota makes a car, produces a car, manufactures a car, whatever the term you want to use, in Georgetown, Kentucky, is it a Japanese car or is it an American-made car? I submit to you it's an American-made car. American workers. Here we find out 75% of the things are American. But somebody could say, well, it's Japanese because it's Japanese manufacturing. Multinational corporation, exactly what it says. It manufactures and markets products in many, many different countries. Notice what it says here. Not all large businesses are multinational. It's restricted to only the firms that have manufacturing capacity and or some other presence in other countries. Those can be said to be multinational. Sovereign wealth funds are funds that are controlled by governments holding investments in foreign companies. Could be good, could be bad. Size of the funds and the fact that they're government-owned makes some fear. Here's what they use there for push political objectives, gain control over natural resources, getting their hands on sensitive technologies. This has been an issue with the United States and some Chinese companies coming over here and buying American businesses, specifically Chinese. Now, not to say there aren't others that do that, but specifically Chinese. And then obviously undermining management. What affects global trade? These are the issues. Obviously, cultural differences, economics and finances, laws and regulations, the environment, the physical environment. We don't need to talk a lot about cultural differences. We know them, but certainly things like manners, religion, values, language, those are all things that come into play. There's some things were lost in translation. There's some things here that are interesting. My favorite one was Chevrolet couldn't figure out why its Nova did not sell in Mexico. Well, if you know that Nova in Spanish means no-go, you'll understand why it weren't selling. Well, why would you buy a car that wouldn't go? Some other things here that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, so we can talk about things that are important. Exchange rates are very important. That's what the exchange, what If you want to buy a euro, what you have to pay in American money right now, it's about $1.05. So if I want to buy 1 euro, I have to give them a dollar and a nickel. However, now just give you an idea, the last time that my wife and I were in Europe a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago now, the euro was around $1.35. So it's dropped quite a bit in the last 2.5 years. Devaluation obviously lowers the value of a currency, and that's been an issue with the United States and some other currencies and countries, and it's going to continue to be one. One of the issues we have with global trade is the first bullet. There are no global laws, and if there were, they would most likely be unenforceable. So when we have disputes about trade, we usually have to go to the World Trade Organization and ask for a ruling, and they don't always go our way. Developing countries have issues. They can't store things. They don't have good distribution. They don't have good infrastructure. And the technology is usually, and unfortunately, is inferior. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't try to trade globally. What it means to say is you have to be aware of those particular issues. Trade protectionism is something that companies use to support local industry. And we can't say anything more than that. And we have to stop and think about that. A couple of ways to do that: by tariffs. Tariffs is one. Pardon me. Tariff is simply a tax. Makes the imported good more expensive. Who pays the tax? The consumer. Two kinds: protective tariff and revenue. Obviously, revenue is to get more money in for the government. A protective tariff is to raise the retail price on imports to protect a domestic industry. Import quota, simply what it says, limits the amount of a particular product that's allowed to be brought into a country. Embargo is a complete ban on products. We had a complete embargo on Cuban products for a number of years. As you know, the president has attempted to normalize relations with Cuba, but the Congress is still imposing the embargo restrictions. World trade, the general agreement on tariff and trade, something that we don't have any longer, but this is, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. We do have this, trying to reduce trade restrictions on goods and services and promote free flow of goods and services. World Trade Organization, which I've talked about before, that's the outfit that arbitrates disputes between countries. Several common markets. One we know the best is the European Common Market, and it's a very strong market in the world. Talked about NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Act, ratified in 1994. I said 93 before, but I was incorrect. A free trade area between 3 North American countries, United States, Canada, Mexico. Now we've tried to do Central American, which talks about Costa Rica and Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala, and a few others. Here's the pros and cons of offshore. We talked about this before. I don't want to go into this too much anymore, but we have to understand that outsourcing is liable to make goods less expensive for the consumer, however, at the cost of losing jobs in the United States. So there's some huge issues with it. And I'm not here to say it's particularly good or particularly bad. I think we have to examine each particular one on its merits and determine whether it's good for the economy or it's not good for the economy. If you want to get into foreign trade and doing business with foreign companies, which you may, even though you don't think you will, study a foreign language. Learn about the culture in the other countries. take global business courses. And we're going to pass on that. And I think that brings us to the end of chapter 3. And tonight's lecture discussion question is: are tariffs? Why do countries impose tariffs, and are tariffs good for the consumer? Post your answers in the forum section on Campus Web and respond to another student's post. So again, the lecture discussion question for tonight is: why do countries impose tariffs? And the second part of the question is: are tariffs good for consumers? Now, I want to thank you for your attention for this evening. We'll be back next week to discuss chapters 4, 5, and 6. Chapter 4 talks about ethics. Chapter 5 is starting a new business, and chapter 6, entrepreneurship. So again, I thank you for your attention and good night.